The courtroom was silent as the bailiff called the case. The air was thick with tension, reporters packed the back rows, and families filled every seat. On one side sat Officer Bradley Cole, polished in uniform, flanked by his legal team. Across from him sat the family of Marcus Hill, a decorated Army veteran who had served 2 tours overseas. His widow clutched their daughter's hand, her eyes hollow. The video footage had gone viral within hours. Marcus, unarmed, had exited his car after being pulled over for a broken tail light. Moments later, a single shot rang out. He collapsed on the pavement. Officer Cole claimed he feared for his life, that Marcus looked aggressive. But the body cam footage painted a different picture. Cole had shouted conflicting orders. Marcus, calm and cooperative, kept his hands visible the entire time. Yet within seconds, Cole fired. No weapon was ever found. No threats were made. Now, as the trial began, the prosecution laid out the facts. This wasn't a judgment call, the attorney said. This was a man reaching for his ID and paying with his life. The defense countered, Officer Cole was following training. The moment felt threatening. He acted to protect himself. Then Cole took the stand, and the story shifted. Officer Cole sat rigid in the witness box, his hands clasped tightly together. His voice, though steady at first, carried a rehearsed tone as he began. I saw a look in his eyes, Cole testified. Something told me he was about to charge. I only had a split second. The prosecutor approached slowly, eyes locked on Cole. Were his hands up, Officer Cole? Yes. Did he ever reach for a weapon? No. Was he yelling, threatening you, making any sudden moves? Cole hesitated. No, but I've been on the force 10 years. Sometimes, you just know. The prosecutor didn't flinch. So your training and experience told you that a man complying with your orders, standing still with his hands in the air, was a danger? Cole shifted in his seat, avoiding eye contact. The room was still. Then the prosecution played the full unedited body cam footage. The moment played in real time, Marcus's calm voice, his slow movement to pull out his wallet, Cole's immediate escalation, the sound of the gunshot echoing through the courtroom. Gasps rippled through the gallery. Marcus's daughter buried her face in her mother's side. Cole looked down, silent. The judge called a recess. But the jury had already seen enough to start forming their thoughts. During the recess, whispers buzzed through the hallway like static. Reporters were already typing up headlines. In the corner, Marcus's widow, Camille, spoke softly with her attorney, trying to hold back the tears. Her daughter clutched a small photo of Marcus in uniform, smiling, proud, alive. Back inside the courtroom, the defense brought in a use of force expert to bolster their case. In high-pressure situations, the expert explained, officers often experience something called threat perception failure. It's not about what the suspect does, it's about what the officer believes might happen. The prosecutor stood. So you're saying it's acceptable to shoot someone for what you think they might do? The expert shifted. Not exactly. But, the prosecutor cut in. Let me be clear. Marcus Hill was standing still. Complying. Unarmed. Not a threat. If an officer can't distinguish between danger and obedience, is that not a failure of the system? There was no answer. Then Camille took the stand. She spoke softly at first, but every word carried weight. Marcus came home from war to raise our daughter in peace. He did everything right that night. And still, he died on the street like he didn't matter. Her voice cracked. You don't get to say he was scary because of how he looked. You don't get to shoot first and cry later. Silence. The jury's eyes were locked on her. And the judge leaned forward, as if the weight of her words had reached the bench. As Camille stepped down, the courtroom remained quiet, no murmurs, no shifting. Just the lingering echo of her final words. Then came the moment that turned everything. The prosecution introduced their final piece of evidence, audio from Officer Cole's cruiser recorded moments before the incident. The defense objected, but the judge allowed it. The clip played. Cole's voice came through the speaker, calm at first. Pulled over a black male, late 30s. Looks like military. Might be trouble. Gonna keep this one tight. A hush fell over the room. The prosecutor let it hang, then said, "Ladies and gentlemen, this wasn't a mistake. This was a choice." The defense scrambled to recover. They argued that the audio was standard protocol, that Cole was just being cautious, not prejudging. But it was too late, the context had already shifted. Cole's fear wasn't reactive. It was presumptive. When closing arguments began, the prosecution didn't raise their voice. "We're not here to put policing on trial. We're here to ask why Marcus Hill is dead when he followed every rule. Why his daughter has to grow up without a father. And why an officer, who swore to protect life, took it without cause, then painted himself as the victim." Cole sat motionless, his face pale. The judge gave instructions to the jury. 12 men and women stood, filed out, and disappeared behind closed doors. The entire room braced itself for what would come next. Hours passed. The jury deliberated behind closed doors while the courtroom remained frozen in uneasy anticipation. Families stayed in their seats. Reporters checked their phones but didn't dare leave. Even Officer Cole seemed rattled, his hands fidgeting, his uniform suddenly feeling like armor too tight to breathe in. Camille sat quietly, holding her daughter. Her eyes were red, but her posture strong. Whatever the outcome, she had told her truth. Finally, the doors opened. The foreperson stepped out, holding a folded sheet of paper. Everyone rose. The judge took the verdict, scanned it silently, then nodded. In the matter of the state versus Officer Bradley Cole, on the charge of involuntary manslaughter, we find the defendant. The pause felt eternal. Guilty. Gasps. Some sobs. A stunned silence. Cole blinked, stunned. The judge continued, "Sentencing will be scheduled within 30 days. Officer Cole is remanded into custody immediately." 2 deputies moved to cuff him. He didn't resist, but his expression cracked for the first time. He wasn't the victim now. He was accountable. Camille closed her eyes, a single tear rolling down her cheek. Justice had spoken. But the room knew this wasn't a victory, it was simply the first step towards something bigger. A reckoning not just for Marcus Hill, but for everyone like him. As Officer Cole was led out of the courtroom in handcuffs, the weight of the moment settled over everyone. This wasn't just about one trial or one verdict, it was about trust, responsibility, and a system that too often failed the very people it claimed to protect. Outside, the courthouse steps were lined with cameras and microphones. Camille stood before them, her daughter by her side. "I didn't come here for revenge," she said, her voice steady. "I came for truth. For accountability. My husband was a soldier, a father, a man who did everything right, and he was taken from us because someone saw danger where there was none." She paused, then added, "We're not asking for special treatment. We're asking to live." Her words were broadcast across the country, sparking conversations in households, police departments, and courtrooms alike. The verdict became a turning point, one of those rare cases where the system did not look away. Marcus Hill's name would be remembered not just for the way his life ended, but for the way his legacy forced a mirror on a system long overdue for reflection. And somewhere, perhaps, a future officer would pause before acting out of fear. A future judge would listen more carefully. And a future daughter wouldn't have to grow up with her father's photo as the only connection to who he was. 2 weeks after the verdict, Camille sat quietly at her kitchen table, surrounded by sympathy cards and folded flags. Her daughter colored at the corner of the table, humming to herself. Life hadn't returned to normal, because it never would, but the silence in their home now felt a little less hollow. Then came the unexpected. A letter arrived from a former police officer, anonymous, handwritten, no return address. I watched the trial. I used to wear the badge. And I've seen what fear does when it goes unchecked. Marcus didn't deserve what happened. I'm sorry. I never knew him, but I'll remember him. And I'll speak up the next time someone like Cole tries to justify the unjustifiable. Camille folded the letter slowly, pressing her hand to her chest. This wasn't justice in full. But it was change. Tiny ripples from a storm no one could ignore anymore. Later that evening, a news segment aired. Today, legislation named after Marcus Hill passed its first vote in Congress. The Hill Act would require national use of force standards, de-escalation training, and mandatory body cam transparency across all law enforcement agencies. Camille watched quietly, her daughter now asleep on her lap. Her voice, once drowned out in a system of silence, had finally begun to echo where it mattered. Marcus's story was no longer just about tragedy. It was about the legacy he left behind, one that might help protect others from becoming a name in a courtroom. The sun had just begun to rise when Camille stepped onto her porch, coffee in hand, wrapped in Marcus's old army hoodie. The neighborhood was quiet, peaceful in a way it hadn't been for months. For the first time since everything happened, she felt like she could breathe. Her phone buzzed. It was a message from the district attorney. Camille, I thought you should know, Cole's sentencing is scheduled for next week. We'll keep you informed of the final recommendation. Also, the judge asked if you'd like to speak before sentencing. No pressure, just your choice. She stared at the message for a long moment. Did she want to speak? She had said so much already, at the trial, to reporters, to her daughter every night when the little girl asked why Daddy wasn't coming back. But something inside her stirred. Maybe one final word was still needed, not for Cole, not even for the court, but for Marcus. Later that day, she opened her laptop and began to write her statement. You wore a badge, and he wore a uniform. But only one of you came home that night. And even though he's not here, Marcus is the one who changed this country, not you. You used fear as an excuse. He used strength to serve. So don't remember his name as the man you shot. Remember it as the reason others won't be. She saved the file. Closed the laptop. Exhaled. And for the first time, Camille felt something she hadn't in months, a sliver of peace. The courtroom was different this time, quieter, more solemn. There were no cameras, no media frenzy. Just a few faces, legal teams, court staff, a handful of quiet observers. But Camille was there, sitting in the same seat she'd occupied weeks ago. Officer Cole sat in the defendant's chair, no longer in uniform, just a plain suit that couldn't hide the weight of what was coming. The judge entered and called the sentencing hearing to order. He spoke briefly, recounting the facts, the jury's decision, and the broader implications. Then he turned to Camille. You may speak now, Mrs. Hill. Camille stood. No tears this time. Just calm strength. She read from her prepared statement, each word measured, unwavering. My husband didn't get a second chance. He didn't get a courtroom to explain himself. You took that from him. And from us. But today, I'm not here to break you down, I'm here to remind this room what accountability looks like. You had the power to choose life, and you chose fear. Marcus gave this country his best years. He deserved better. And I refuse to let his memory be reduced to body cam footage and hashtags. He was a father, a husband, and a man who believed in serving others. That's who Marcus Hill was. That's who he'll always be. She stepped back down. Not a sound in the room. The judge adjusted his glasses and looked directly at Cole. You had seconds to act, and in those seconds, you made a decision that ended a life. You then came into this courtroom and attempted to shift blame. But justice is not about protecting pride. It's about protecting truth. Then he delivered the sentence, 12 years in state prison, without parole. Gasps, again. This time, not in shock, but in recognition that something rare had happened. A system had listened. And responded. 1 year later. The plaque was simple. Bronze, understated, but powerful. In honor of Sergeant Marcus Hill, a life of service. A legacy of change. It stood in front of a newly opened community center named after him, focused on veteran support and justice reform training for young officers. The center had been Camille's idea, born from grief, but built on hope. A small crowd gathered for the dedication. Camille stood at the podium, her daughter holding her hand. Reporters were present, but respectful. Today wasn't about headlines. It was about healing. "I don't want Marcus remembered for how he died," Camille said, her voice clear over the breeze. "I want him remembered for how he lived. For the way he loved this country, his family, and the belief that people can do better, must do better." Applause followed, gentle but meaningful. After the ceremony, a young officer approached her, fresh out of the academy, nerves visible on his face. "Ma'am," he said quietly, "I read everything about your husband. We studied his case in training. I want you to know, it changed how I see this job. It made me understand the weight of the badge." Camille nodded, placing a hand on his shoulder. "Then Marcus is still doing what he always did, making people better." As the crowd dispersed, her daughter tugged at her sleeve. "Mom, do you think Daddy's proud?" Camille smiled, her eyes misty but full of light. "I know he is." They walked away from the plaque, hand in hand, toward a future Marcus helped shape, one truth at a time. That evening, long after the ceremony ended, Camille sat alone in the quiet of her living room. The community center had been a success. The speech had gone exactly as planned. But now, in the stillness, with the cameras gone and the crowd dispersed, the weight of everything caught up to her. She walked to the shelf and picked up an old photo, Marcus in uniform, grinning in the sun, holding their newborn daughter wrapped in a hospital blanket. She sat down slowly and whispered, "You did it, baby. Even from beyond, you did it." Then came the knock. She opened the door to find a man in civilian clothes, a former juror from the trial. He held a single white rose. "I just wanted to say thank you," he said. "Not for your words. For your strength. We didn't just find him guilty because of the law. We did it because of you." Camille accepted the rose and nodded, holding back tears. That night, as her daughter slept and the house quieted again, Camille stepped outside. The stars were sharp in the sky. She didn't say anything. She just looked up. Because sometimes, words aren't needed. Sometimes, justice doesn't roar. It whispers. And sometimes, the most powerful legacy, is peace. Watch the video on the screen.